Hi, my name is Cheese, and welcome to another Fossil Sweeper Progress Update video. If you haven't heard of the project before, you can find an overview here, but the TLDR is, it's like Minesweeper, but you're digging up fossils, and you get to build skeletons out of the stuff you find. For the past month or so, I've been spending time working on items that increase variation in the dig and assembly phases. While going through my notes on remaining work items for the previous video's Year 2 recap, I felt motivated to experiment with some of the ideas I had for non-square dig sites. Previously, dig sites would be a rectangle with random dimensions in one axis, and whatever needed to make up the target number of tiles for the other axis. From the beginning, I'd wanted to do something more organic feeling for Fossil Sweeper, and my first thought was to create a blobby shape and extend it with some noise clipped to a maximum radius. This seemed capable of creating results within the ballpark of what I wanted, but it was also prone to both internal and external islands, which are solvable but aren't ideal. My second thought was to walk a path similar to a noise worm, but I didn't go very far with this one because I came across a solution for creating blobby shapes, which Stack Overflow user Yevgeny Sergeyev calls creating a piecewise affine potato and then smooth it by interpolating. Link in the description. The interpolation uses discrete Fourier transforms, which is a little beyond my tiny maths brain. My potato brain, on the other hand, is huge, so using the first half of Yevgeny's approach as a starting point, I put together my own solution. From a random distribution of points, I create a convex hull, which is the smallest shape with no internal corners that encompasses all points. Imagine a really tight rubber band stretched around them all. Godot has a handy function that takes a point cloud and returns only the outside points on the convex hull in the order that they would be needed to create a solid polygon. These can have very pointy corners, which doesn't really make for good gameplay, so to round them out I add an extra circle of points around each of the original points, and then get the convex hull of that. This gives much nicer, rounder corners. It makes the shapes a little bit more blobby in general. But there's not a lot of diversity of the kind of shapes that get made. By adding a second shape, the range of possibilities goes up immensely, and we bring back the potential for some internal, or concave, corners. By nature of these being convex shapes, the midpoint between any two random points is guaranteed to be inside the shape. So by doing that for each, and aligning those midpoints, I'll know that I end up with one combined shape instead of two separate ones. Since they're both convex, they can't create islands either. Some of the internal corners feel a little bit sharp though, and so to smooth them out just a little, I expand the whole shape by one tile more. I do a couple of other things, such as some scaling steps to guarantee the right number of tiles. Remember that doubling gives you twice the dimensions, but 4 times the area? But that's more or less the final shape. I don't think that an infinite number of possible dig sites is a meaningful selling point. Using that in marketing would just create the wrong expectations. But I do think that the variation brings something important to the game, both in terms of making things that you do repetitively feel less samey, but also for giving a superficially visible point of difference from more traditional Minesweeper style games. I find that it has a subtle impact on gameplay too. Corners and edges don't feel like they mean quite the same thing, and there are some new number patterns for curves and diagonals that I've found fun to discover. I've also had a bit of fun from seeing things in the shapes that are generated, but I don't expect this to be something players do. Knowing that someone, somewhere, will prefer square dig sites, I also added that back in as an optional setting, so that anybody who wants that experience can still get it. Similarly, in the assembly phase, I'd been wanting to bring back size variations for skeletons for a long time. When I first bought the assembly phase online in this codebase, I had done the initial work on that, but as I integrated it into the rest of the game, where size information would come from the existing skeleton instance, and implemented other features such as automatic camera scaling, a bunch of things related to position checks and scaling needed work, so I disabled it temporarily in order to allow me to continue with other work. It didn't end up taking much effort, and now every newly started skeleton has a randomly selected size, weighted towards making full-grown skeletons the most common, and various partly grown sizes a little bit less common, and notably big ones very rare. I'll be doing some research down the track to make sure that the final shape of that curve isn't too far off being representative of the kind of things we find in the real world, which I imagine varies a lot from species to species, though at this stage I'm not planning to have per species granularity for size distribution. Again, like the dig site shape variation, it doesn't make sense to say there are an infinite number of possible skeletons, but already it makes my 2 poses for each of the placeholder species feel like a lot more, and that gives me confidence that when I have 4 or 5 poses per skeleton with final assets, that'll come close to feeling about right. A very big thank you to the supporters going by on screen at the moment. Their supporters help me eat while making this game, and I am so very appreciative. Special thanks also to new supporter Sydney, who I completely neglected to mention in the previous video. Sorry, Sydney! A huge thanks also to Screen Tasmania, who supported this project with a small grant. Anyway, that's about it for today. If you'd like to keep track of development or try the playable prototype, you can find some links in the description. And if you're super keen to check out what we talked about here today, I make early test builds available to my supporters on Patreon. Thanks for watching, and goodbye!